Hello, everybody, and welcome into Windy City Gridiron Radio. Hold on, we're having a little technical difficulty there. Sorry. Okay, starting over. Welcome into Windy City Gridiron Radio. Really excited because this week's going to be big for the Bears, ideally. It's free agency week, everybody. Going to probably make or break the Ryan Pace era. No pressure. Really set the table for Trubisky, provided Mr. Trubisky, that is, provided the Bears can nail it. I'm Robert Zaglinski, as always, and for the first time, I'm joined by one of our newer writers. He's been around Windy City Gridiron for a while as a commenter and a loyal lurker. What's a kinder word? What's a kinder word?
I would definitely say the most kind statement was given all the way back from Steven Schweikert, or the Orange Shy Guy, as I remember meeting him, and basically the Miner's Canary is how he would reference me as. So, yes, it is I, ladies and gentlemen, the one and only Optimus Prime, Eric Christopher Derwachter, a.k.a. that guy with the impossibly long last name.
Eric Christopher Derwachter, a guy that I've had to copy and paste anytime I've put him into bylines or in our email chain. But this should be fun for his first time. Follow him on Twitter at @eDerwachter. He's pretty easy to find. He's, again, one of the more optimistic people. He lives up to his name, everybody. He lives up to his name. He's good people. He has good takes. Follow me on Twitter, Robert Zaglinski. We're getting this out of the way right away because we're about to get into this conversation. Before we talk any of the fits, before we get into any Allen Robinson hype, because it's that time of year. Eric, we need. I can already see cabin fever setting you in. My mentions every day on Twitter, and I know this doesn't speak for Bears Twitter as large, but I have a decent amount to where just people are already concerned. People are already like writing off the Bears, or I know they haven't earned the benefit of the doubt. I know that's not something that's easy to do. I'm not saying in terms of success in free agency or success in general recently, obviously, but to just stay neutral. For me, it's probably better to just stay neutral, to probably let something happen before you panic, before you start talking about, oh, San Francisco's going to outbid the Bears for Allen Robinson. Oh, Mitch Trubisky is an attractive guy to attract free agents. We don't know that. This is the first time where the Bears can sell Trubisky. This is the first time where you can be optimistic and hopeful that he will be the guy to sell to free agents, or to sell to top free agents. And part of it is, I mean, this is being a sports fan, being someone that follows sports. You want to think it's going to go what's the point of being constantly down in the dumps? Like, again, I'm not trying to tell anybody what to feel. I'm just saying to let it play out. I mean, in the words of Bane from The Dark Knight Rises, one of the more famous Batman villains in general, when the Bears are burning, then you have my permission to panic. The loose paraphrase. So when the Bears are burning after this week, if they're burning, then you have my permission to actually panic. But let's stay calm now. Let's just, the next few days are going to be crazy. You're going to put yourself in a tizzy over inaction.
Absolutely agreed. And my perspective of this is pretty much, for the 4 years I studied within sport management, we looked at basically all the different leagues, NBA, NHL, MLB, NFL. And my professors kind of had this really interesting theory. So it's way too early to even confirm anything. As a matter of fact, I hate to say this, but officially, free agency has yet to even begin. All these trades that have been announced, they're not official. These signings that are rumored to happen, like, spoiler alert, Kirk Cousins to the Minnesota Vikings, as many people would believe, again, they're not officially done deals. They are not officially done deals until ink is put to paper. The only Bears that have signed. Go ahead.
Sorry. No, I didn't want to interrupt. But to be fair, some of these deals are.
Official.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. So the only players that can officially sign are players who were terminated by their previous team. So Richard Sherman being the latest example with a 3-year, $39 million deal in total value, although the base salary to that is $7 million. But basically, the majority of these trades, the majority of these signings are rumored to be signings, are not officially done until ink is put to paper. And also, another interesting theory is it's always the teams that are most quiet within the first 2 days of these so-called negotiating periods, or God forbid we use the term legal tampering period. There's no such thing as legal tampering. It is tampering whether they want to admit it or not. But it's always the teams that kind of make the least amount of noise prior to this so-called tampering period that wind up just swinging for the fences, getting the home runs, figuratively speaking, and they really are the teams that kind of strike gold out of nowhere. I mean, we've seen it for the last couple of years in a row. A lot of these teams we didn't expect to be active free agency. I remember Green Bay's done this a couple of times. Detroit's done this a couple of times. They were really quiet up until this legal tampering period begins. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, we see these big-time free agency signings happen. So to all the fans out there that are just kind of sort of in panic mode, like, oh, no, we lost out on Richard Sherman. Oh, no, we may not be able to get Muhammad Wilkerson. Just settle down, relax. It's just not even the tampering period yet. It's just the calm before the storm. The Bears have more cap space than most teams in the NFL.
They have an attractive roster, in my opinion.
Very attractive roster. They have a new coaching staff in place, but they also have an experienced defensive coordinator. They keep that defense the same. So really, one thing that hasn't really been discussed much, which I'm sure the two of us will talk about later, is how attractive it would be for defensive free agents, for like the edge players or the corner players, because you have Vic Fangio there for the 4th year. You have a team that had the 10th total defense in the league, 9th in the league in scoring. And you also have this new head coach who brings in a lot more energy, a lot more excitement at Matt Nagy. You have a quarterback in Mitchell Trubisky. He's really on the Chicago Bears. He offers one of the very few absolute locks in terms of long-term options in free agency. The Bears have the money to spend. They have their quarterback in place. They have the coaching staff that are going to be very creative in how to use their players. And best of all, you don't have any sense of people being on hot seats. I can't tell you how many times we've seen free agencies where teams that are flush with cap space, like unfortunately Chicago last year, they're flush with cap space, but their coaching staff's on a hot seat. Their quarterback situation is a complete mess. And players will take money, or rather less money, with other teams if they feel there's more comfort with their coaching staff and or their quarterback position.
Absolutely agree. I feel like this is going to be a very optimistic podcast, right? Immediately from the tone we set. A little angry at the start, but I can already sense it. To the other points, I wanted, like, there are like fallacies. Like I was bored on Twitter not 30 minutes ago, maybe not 30, 40 minutes ago, where there's this fallacy that, all the teams with recently bad records are going, not like the Bears aren't going to have a chance.
Oh, great.
That's not how it works. It goes off the roster in place. A free agent, first of all, it's about money. So if the guy gets the money he wants, he's going to more than likely go to the team, unless it's the Browns. But even they seem to kind of have a plan in place now with a competent general manager and John Dorsey. Second of all, again, it's like I mentioned, it's the projection. So you went through it all: Trubisky, the coach, the roster. A guy has to see the future there. That's what matters more. It doesn't matter that the team last year was 6-10, 5-11, 4-12. It matters what they're going to be during the guy's contract, what he believes they're going to be during the guy's contract. It's about selling him on that mission statement or the goal.
The future.
That he can see the future. Which was, again, to your point about the 2017 Bears with lame duck coach. How many of those free agents are seeing the future? The Bears are settling on these tier 2 and tier 3 guys because they couldn't land the top guys to sell them future, or they had to really pony up to sell to, say, Stephon Gilmore or AJ Bouye, who spooned them, who didn't want to leave the AFC South. That's different this year. That's different. They're in a much more comfortable position. I mean, for me, the only team, and this is where we'll pivot the conversation. The only team I'm and I wouldn't say I'm concerned. I wouldn't say I'm necessarily concerned about them because they're flush with cap space, but I feel like Jimmy Garoppolo, and maybe this turns into a hot take 2 or 3 years from now. I think he's good. But I'm not a fan of this social media anointing oils being given out immediately to a guy who has 7 starts. Oh man, or how they finished the season. I don't care how they finished 2017. He has 7 NFL starts, and they have all this flush cap space, and that is a little bit of concern. But I'm not that convinced John Lynch knows what he's doing yet, especially concerning the Sherman contract. We'll see how they do. They're probably the top suitor that's going to compete with that are going to compete with the Bears for most of the free agents. So that's where most of the concern lies. But aside from that, I mean, you look at the Sherman deal, where Sherman gets $16 million more in guaranteed money if he makes the Pro Bowl next year, which he very well could. I mean, John Lynch hasn't won anything, so let's ease off on this. Oh, the Niners are gonna take over the league and become the next Patriots.
Yes, absolutely. And you mentioned this a little bit earlier, and I noticed the exact same tweet. Oh no, teams with recently losing records have no chance for agency. Have we forgotten about the Philadelphia Eagles who won the Super Bowl after going 7-9 last year?
Yeah.
Like, have we forgotten about Doug Peterson and that Eagles front office led by Howie Roseman?
Yes.
Basically, they went out, they did a bunch of trades for, that people thought were relatively obscure. Torrey Smith, oh, great, what's he going to do? He was a free agent signing. They went out and they traded a bunch of their, mid to late round picks. They signed a bunch of players, maybe not to the biggest deals per se, but they went out. They got impact free agents like Alshon Jeffrey. And as you mentioned, they saw the future. They saw the Eagles with a quarterback and Carson Wentz, and then a really great backup quarterback in Nick Foles under a very young but talented coaching staff and Doug Peterson, all his coordinators, that absolutely loaded defense led by one Jim Schwartz, and pretty much players actually in some aspect like that idea of becoming the reason why a team becomes great. From my personal hypothesis, when I had to do basically a couple of different projects and papers, players in any sport want 2 things. They want money in the form of security, and 2, they want an opportunity to win games or be a part of the winning, which brings me to the whole idea that Jimmy Garoppolo somehow is now a demigod amongst quarterbacks. He has 7 total starts. Mitchell Trubisky has more starts in the NFL than Jimmy Garoppolo, okay? Jimmy Garoppolo has been in the league for 4 to 5 years, sitting behind Tom Brady, getting more or less the Aaron Rodgers treatment. And then when he's finally given his team to shine in with the 49ers, yeah, he puts up some impressive numbers, but they weren't also Hall of Fame numbers. It wasn't like he went out and got 500 yards a game, 5 touchdowns a game. Yeah, they went 5-0 to finish the year, which is extremely impressive considering they lost every game before that. But again, we've seen this happen before. I remember this situation very fondly happen to the Chiefs many years ago. You had this one particular backup quarterback with the New England Patriots. Tom Brady went down with an injury. I think you know exactly who I'm referencing here. Matt Castle had this really impressive 16-game season when he took over for Tom Brady, and they just missed the playoffs in the 2008 season. So after the Denver Broncos completely whiffed on their attempt to trade for Matt Castle, which, by the way, is really upset of one quarterback named Jay Cutler, and the rest was history, the Kansas City Chiefs basically mortgaged their future on Matt Castle because of one season's worth of work. They mortgaged their future on Matt Castle, And look what happened. Did Matt Castle last long in Kansas City? I didn't think so. So what San Francisco really has to be cognizant about is putting the expectations in a realistic place for Jimmy Garoppolo and a relatively young team. And plus, when you look at John Lynch's overall free agency targets last year, not only did he not really get a lot of impactful players, like just he got a lot of tier 2 and 3 players himself. But a lot of the big money he spent, Pierre Garcon, it hasn't really panned out yet. He had a lot of misses in free agency last year. In fact, some would say he had a worse free agency last year than Ryan Pace did last year, depending who you ask. Now that's a great debate to have. That's a different time. But to your point, it's way too soon to even think, okay, John Lynch has an idea what he's doing. We don't know yet. It's only one season under the John Lynch era. It's only one season under the Kyle Shanahan era. It's only 5 games under the Jimmy Garoppolo era. So yes, they have some money to compete with the Bears. Yes, they just signed a notable player, Richard Sherman. But that guarantees almost nothing after that. It's a level playing field once teams are officially allowed to negotiate with players. Once open season has commenced, the bidding wars have commenced. It's a fair, level playing field. So again, I kind of see the 49ers being competition for the Bears, but the one thing I would caution about as well is don't sleep on any team in the NFL. Don't sleep on the Colts with a maniacal and money spending freak in Jim Irsay, because yeah, they have a lot of questions of their own. We don't know what the heck's going on with Andrew Luck, but don't ever underestimate the power of the almighty dollar. And the Indianapolis Colts, they know how to basically attract free agents. Like Jim Irsay is one of the best recruiters. And to close up this topic, I see teams like the Colts, the Jets. If they're not careful, they could be competition as well. Just to be cognizant.
In Matt Castle to Jimmy Garoppolo comparison, I'm not saying I disagree, but I mean, okay, no, I could see that. I could see a guy getting hot and then 26 years old sitting forever. I mean, he has the Patriots. Okay, I can see that. Just as a note, you keep noting that legal tampering period. We must be purposely saying this to upset the WCG's den master Ken Mitchell. Legal tampering period. Sorry, Ken. Tomorrow it officially opens at 11 a.m. Eastern for everyone as a note. So when you're listening to this tomorrow morning, when you're listening to this at lunch, when you're listening to this on your commute, whatever, it opens at 10 a.m. Central if you're in Chicago. Just so that's when the rumors will start boiling. That's when visits can start happening. That's when players and coaches and front offices can literally just about do anything with each other over the next 2 days, and then deals can be reached at 4:00 Eastern on Wednesday. So, without further ado, let's start talking the free agents. There's been a lot of linked guys to the Bears. We're going to start with receiver because there's 2 players here in particular. We kind of mentioned them at the start of the show. We're going to hype them up a little bit because for me at this point, not landing Allen Robinson is a failure for Ryan Pace, because this isn't someone that wasn't expected to be available a few days ago. And now he's a legitimate number 1 receiver available. I know he's coming off of an ACL, but I don't think an ACL recovery is as serious as it was even a decade ago, especially considering Robinson tore this in week 1. So he should be fully good to go by July, especially with everything sports medicine. Yes, if Pace doesn't land Robinson, then it's a failure. And considering all of the noise that we've been seeing of late, it seems the Bears are ready to go all in on Robinson. So if they don't get Robinson, who is a guy that will become Trubisky's best friend, who's a guy that will help the Bears offense legitimately become elite. I think adding Robinson along with the other rumored targets, offensive targets we're going to get to, it isn't out of question to see the Bears becoming a top 10 level offense, becoming a creative offense with a litany of targets and explosive weapons. He has to get him. And I wouldn't characterize them as the favorite, but I would feel very confident in it right now.
Yes, and to go on your point, there's only been, I believe, 5 different sources in Chicago media alone, and there's actually recently been one national media member. Basically, Allen Robinson is the guy the Bears are all in on. I mean, it really depends on who's your favorite writer in Chicago at this point. They've all been honing in on him. The Chicago Tribune's been suggesting this. The Chicago Sun-Times been suggesting this. 24/7 Sports has been looking at this as well. Allen Robinson is the guy that will be the biggest difference maker for the Chicago Bears, really, in the last few years. He would, as you mentioned several times, be kind of an offensive equivalent to a Julius Peppers type signing.
He's the last. I was going to say that he's the last. If the Bears will land Robinson, this is the biggest free agent signing they've made since 2010. Continue. Sorry.
Yeah, exactly. It's critical that Ryan Pace takes advantage of this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, because I mentioned this on Twitter. A player like Allen Robinson, yes, he's coming off a torn ACL. That's a serious injury. But also now it's more commonplace to see them be back full strength next year. I just happened to live down the road from the Andrews Institute and had a really great conversation with Dr. O'Grady, basically about how fast medicine has developed to repair the ACL, and it's night and day. Back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, yeah, it's a career-ending injury. Nowadays, it's regular maintenance to some extent. So on that point, the Bears have the resource, they have the cap space, they have people within the coaching staff, i.e. the running backs coach, Charles London, and even the players on the roster, Adrian Amos, who know him in person, who have been with him at Penn State. They have the people to recruit him. And again, they have a quarterback and an offensive mind in Matt Nagy. So there really is zero excuse not to land Allen Robinson. Now, if the worst comes to worst, before we grab our pitchforks and torches, there are other options prior to the draft. Of course, one of them is Albert Wilson, the shifty slot receiver from the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean,
hold on. Wilson's more of a secondary option.
I
wouldn't. If the Bears just landed Wilson as a lone receiver,
he's a secondary option for sure.
He's a secondary option in that he'll be a fit in the offense, but I'd be disappointed. They need someone else to be right. Yeah, anyway, go on.
And pretty much so, he would help the core a little bit, but probably really the only other realistic option that can make a meaningful impact if the Bears somehow fail to get Robinson would be Sammy Watkins. And yeah, his numbers aren't eye-popping per se in terms of receiving yards, even though a couple years ago he did have 1,000-yard seasons while with the Bills. His touchdown, he came on the last 8 weeks of the regular season. He had 6 touchdowns in 8 games to close out the year for the Rams. So Sammy Watkins, he's a bit more of a risk. He's not exactly the kind of dynamic, crisp route runner that Allen Robinson is. But he's also not exactly a slouch in making big plays. So I would suggest the plan B would be they would target Sammy Watkins and, of course, Albert Wilson to complement him from the slot. And then they probably wind up drafting another receiver within the first 4 rounds of the draft.
The key with Robinson will just be that Pace isn't risk averse which if you're buying this new Ryan Pace, that would mean Robinson is sold on Trubisky or Watkins, really, as you just mentioned. They're sold on Trubisky, but I'm for the purpose of this point I'm making, it's Robinson. He buys into the quarterback, and you give him a contract of around 15 or 16 million average. I think his market will settle in around there, especially if some of the rumor teams that are in on him, such as the 49ers, that are also in on him, such as the 49ers, Colts, and Browns. You give him 15 million, as an average. You give him three. You give him a 5-year contract, and you give him 3 of those guaranteed. That's not something that Pace has done in the past, where he gives 60% of a deal, really upfront. But that's what it's going to take for most of these guys. That's what it takes to land a superstar. So it'll be curious to see if he does that, because I think if Pace does do that, that's the deal that needs to happen, the kind of deal that needs to happen. Then Robinson will be. We're going to have a reincarnation of the number 15 in Chicago in a nice navy and orange uniform. Let's move over to cornerback. So the elephant in the room is Kyle Fuller. Seeing as how the Bears transition tagged him, it isn't set in stone yet, but it's also very unlikely that he leaves. But until, like, as you've noted time over and over in this podcast already, until the ink is dry on a new long-term contract, which is what the transition tag is used to do, because it lets Fuller see the market and then come back to the Bears after they match any deals. It would mean that they're comfortable with him testing the market. You have to keep that door open. But let's say Fuller comes back. I'm pretty confident he's going to come back. I'm pretty confident his deal will be at around 4 to 5 years, a $12.5 million average. Probably 40, at least 50% of it guaranteed if he's your number one cornerback. These are the kinds of deals Pace is going to have to give out to free agents. Let's talk number 2. This is what we're going to have this conversation for. So I'm going to give out 2 options. So they both seem to be in play. I think one's much more in play than the other. And then there's also obviously the Prince Amukamara factor, but which doesn't seem likely at this point. So, but these 2 options: Bashaud Breeland and Trumaine Johnson.
Well, in terms
as the number 2 next to Fuller, I should say that before you start. Yeah, as the number 2 next to Fuller. So everybody, because I ranted there. Continue.
Oh, I mean, by all means, that's a really good pair to choose from. In my personal opinion, if the Bears do sign Trumaine Johnson, which they have every ability in the world to do so, I would actually look at Trumaine Johnson being your primary number 1 corner, just based off of his ability to lock down players one-on-one. His length would really fit tremendously well in Vic Fangio's scheme. Of course, he's not going to go to anyone in free agency unless it's for top corner money. So the question will be, will Ryan Pace be willing to commit, $12, $13 million per year between 2 different players?
He's going to get paid more than Fuller. So what do we say, 16, 17?
Probably 15, just in my personal opinion.
15
because
okay.
Trumaine is not the ball hawk you'd want to see in the secondary. He's, kind of a right under Richard Sherman in terms of just being really savvy and sitting on routes, breaking up passes, being able to identify routes. He's got really good high football IQ. So Trumaine Johnson, he would be the more or less the sexy pick. But if they really are making Kyle Fuller, corner number 1, I'll say Rashad Breeland would be more of a realistic option. I want to add in another name, Malcolm Butler. I mean, say what you want about what happened in the Super Bowl. He's not the greatest corner in the world. He's solid. And I feel he's got a little bit of a chip on his shoulder, too. We've seen it happen several times. But go ahead, Rob.
Hold on. Okay, no. Make your point. Wait, no. I'll say it. I can see Butler as an option, but I think he's too small for what Vic Fangio prefers. Vic Fangio is a guy that likes length in his corners. He likes longer arms. Butler has short arms and he's short. Talk about how he would fit, how you think he would fit anyway. I just want to add that caveat so anyone listening understands. Butler's like 5'9", and he doesn't. And Fangio typically likes his corners to have like 33-inch, 34-inch arms. Butler has like, I think off the top of my head, like 30 and like 7/8. Anyway, continue.
So the reason why I brought up Malcolm Butler is because, yeah, he would, physically speaking, not look like a prototypical fit for Vic Fangio, or at least not as good of a prototypical fit as Rashawn Breeland or Tremaine Johnson would offer. However, when you look at Malcolm Butler, he's extremely physical off the line of scrimmage. He understands how to actually get his hands on the receiver, jam him off the routes, get him rerouted, and he is just a player that absolutely does not quit. Again, he's not the world's greatest corner. Let's just get that out of the way. He's not someone that you're going to say, oh, he's an all-pro corner. He is a rock-solid guy. As Lester Wilfong has said many times, you have to have just capable guys able to play football. And Malcolm Butler, we've seen him when he's at his best. He's locked up against some of the better talent in the league. And he's put up some really respectable performances time and time again. So I feel his size, yes, you look at that from a physical standpoint and wonder how is he going to fit. But don't ever underestimate Vic Fangio's abilities to, coach a player and be able to diverse his schemes around talent. Remember, Willie Young was not supposed to be a decent 3-4 outside linebacker. He was supposed to have been cut years ago. And look what Vic Fangio was able to do with him. And you look at other players in the secondary as well. I mean, look at, Crevon LeBlanc. I mean, he's not the biggest corner in the world neither, but he's put up some decent performances as well. And Malcolm Butler is definitely a step above LeBlanc in terms of coverage ability. So that's where I see the fit. For the lack of height and length he has, he makes up for the physicality and the ability to physically lock up with corners.
I agree with you. I like Butler, but Fangio doesn't seem like the creative type. Fangio doesn't seem like a guy that goes away from those ideals of what he prefers in his players. That goes for what he prefers on the edge too. I think the Bears and Fangio also like their guys like Floyd and McPhee and Young, who all had at least 33-inch arms. They like them to be long. They like them to be able to set the edge very well with that length. Butler, for me, if I was running a football team, would be an ideal number 2 cornerback. To Breeland's fit, I think he's the best number 2 cornerback in the league. I'm not saying that because I think he's a fit for the Bears. I think he's the best number 2 cornerback in the league. I think this is a guy that if you stretch him out of that role, he's not and turn him into a number 1. Then he's going to struggle. But you put him with the Bears, say the Bears with Fuller, where he's getting the second assignment. He's more than that, and he's a ball hawk, and he's physical, and he's long. I believe the second cornerback is a need. We're discussing that for that purpose because it is a need. We don't know what's going to happen with Prince Mukamara. And I don't know how likely it is that the Bears are going to invest. Let's say Breeland gets $10 million average. Let's say that happens. Yep. I don't know how likely it is that the Bears are going to invest 22.5, 23, 24 million into their 2 starting cornerbacks. Yeah. But I'd like to see them do it. I'd like what, as an overarching theme here, I'd like this to be the free agency. The Bears will have around 80 to 90 million cap space, barring cuts that will come once positions are filled in. Anyone listening can make the inference as to what those cuts are. Think Deion Sims. I'd like to see them spend 65 to 70 million of that. So I'd like to see them lock in the core this window while Trubisky's at his cheapest on his contract, if you believe that he's going to be a star or competent starting quarterback, and spend on a Breeland. Or if Fangio gets creative and spend on a Butler next to Fuller, and really be aggressive. Continuing on defense, there are this great pass rushers. What's the truth about them in free agency, Eric? What's the truth about them in free agency?
So before I get to that topic really quick, I kind of want to add something that's kind of important to monitor. So the last 3 years, especially the last 2 years, Ryan Pace, regardless of what happened with Kyle Fuller or anyone else in the secondary, he went after the top corners in the market. So don't be surprised if he winds up going after Jermaine Johnson after all. Just something to keep in note. And who knows, maybe he does spend $26 million between two corners. We'll see with that. But in terms of the edge players, if that is the topic we are on, right?
We're talking about the edge players. So what I asked you, so fill in the great pass rushers and free agency. What's the truth about them?
The truth is they don't hit the market.
Yep.
If you're a great edge player, teams, just like any decent quarterback, they're going to lock them up. They don't exactly grow in trees. So, especially this year, it's kind of sort of shallow in terms of depth for your edge players. And I'm sure you've got quite a few names already in mind. One name I would not be surprised at all to see Ryan Pace approach would actually, be someone in the name of. I actually almost just.
Did you lose the name?
Junior Gillette. Junior Gillette.
Okay.
Had back-to-back years from 15 and 16 with an Achilles injury. 17 didn't start a game, still managed to muster 3 sacks in a relatively reserved role. But in 13 and 14, this guy was just, sack after sack after sack. He had 22 sacks between those 2 seasons. Oh, by the way, Ryan Pace just so happened to have been there to have seen that. And I would say if you want to take a gamble and offer a smallish deal for a veteran presence, he would make a lot of sense, especially since he is a prototypical 3-4 outside linebacker. But outside of him, I would say the best option for the Bears would just keep Lamar Houston. I mean, Lamar Houston had 4 sacks in the final 5 games after being claimed by the Bears. So if I had to say my own names to start this off, I would say, Lamar Houston would be an obvious fit. Junior Gillette would be an obvious fit. Who knows, maybe Adrian Claiborne. But it's a really shallow, free agency for edge players this year.
It's not I've had a lot of people constantly ask me, "Oh, what's the Bears' plan? How are they going to fix it in free agency?" They're not going to fix it in free agency.
Absolutely not.
Those names you just mentioned, like Lamar Houston. Like Lamar Houston, if they do bring him back, he's the number 3, or even ideally, he's the number 4. He can't be in a starting role, and I don't think the Bears see him that way either. I mean, they just released Willie Young. They just released Pernell McPhee, who are also aging guys. I think they want to get younger at the position. Names to consider, to keep in mind, Connor Barwin, who's been athletic enough to drop back as an outside linebacker, who is a solid veteran. You can play part-time. Jeremiah Tachu from the Chargers, former second-round pick. A lot of upside there. That's a risk. That's a guy you can kind of project as a number 3. Hasn't been healthy of late, so again, the edge is going to be more about upside bets and like giving guys chances. Alex Okafor from the Saints, solid pass rusher, good run defender. Again, I'm describing these guys that are solid veterans, not necessarily key pieces. That's addressing edge in free agency will be more about gravy, just like putting a little extra gravy on defense. Where the Bears, which will be for once we're past this week, where the Bears are going to have to get better is in the draft, because there are plenty of options in the 2nd and 4th round. Completely different topic. But yeah, Alex Okafor, if they wanted to perhaps maybe sign a defensive end, Muhammad Wilkerson. I don't think they're really high in there. I think Wilkerson ends up a Packer with a Mike Penn connection. You also have to consider that a lot of the Bears probably aren't going to be a full court press on getting these guys. So this is very much a position that is, what's the best way to phrase this? Stay tuned. To be determined. To be determined. Let's focus on receiver. Let's focus on the playmakers. Let's focus on offense. Let's focus on bringing back Fuller, and then we can talk about like positions that can actually be fixed in other avenues. Offensive line, Eric. Let's get to that. Let's move to this.
Mm-hmm.
Fitz. I don't think the Bears are going to address tackle. That's probably something that's going to happen in the draft, barring a cut of a guy I keep plugging, which I just want people to keep in mind. Jawan James from the Dolphins. The Dolphins are in salary cap hell. Jawan James, they rescinded Jawan James' 5th-year option a little while back, like a couple months back after the season, and he's a very likely cap that could happen in the next few days. That has a Harry Heastand connection from college, so keep him in mind. But if they don't go after him, for the Bears, this free agency is going to be more about addressing the interior. So I'm going to plug 2 names here who I've heard, who you've heard one of them. The other one, I don't believe you have. And one is Zach Fulton from the Chiefs, obvious.
That's the obvious one.
The obvious one. And the other is Ryan Jensen, guard from the Ravens, who would also play center. So
I've actually heard that name. I actually did see that name pop up from time to time.
So Ryan Jensen. So better fit, which we also have to and I also want you to touch on the fact that both will probably play center, so that means the Bears have settled in on Cody Whitehair at guard.
That is a very interesting question because I'm one of the very few people that still believe for the term of long-term development, Cody Whitehair would be best to stay as a center and then they assign a veteran guard.
Right.
I'm one of the few people that believes that. But it sounds like the Bears might very well be planning on moving Whitehair to guard and then signing a veteran at center, which would make sense. And the better fit for me, logistically speaking, would definitely be Zach Fulton, because the one issue he had in Kansas City was, unfortunately, he is a penalty machine. He has had a lot of false starts and a lot of pre-snap penalties. But when he gets past those issues, he's a very solid run blocker and a dependable, if not a respectable, pass blocker. Plus, he already understands some of the concepts that Matt Nagy wants to install, that Brad Childers wants to install. And he is that guard center type of player that Harry Heistad just loves to work his magic with. So Ryan Jensen is an interesting option, and he would make a solid addition if he's brought along as well. I personally would see Jensen more as a guard per se, just in terms of, hand placement, being able to get leverage and their abilities to play in the inside. But with Fulton, he has a familiarity with Brad Childress and with Matt Nagy. He has that versatility that Harry Heistad loves to utilize early on. And he has that dependability you want at center. He's really good with snaps. That was Cody Whitehair's biggest problem, by the way. It was just those shotgun snaps for whatever reason, just from week after week or once every other game, you would just see a wild snap. So that also might be a part of the evaluation why he's going to guard as well as the center. And Fulton, his snaps are really smooth. I don't think I've seen too many of any wild snaps from Zach Fulton. What do you think about him?
Fulton, aside from the penalties, I think he's not a star by any means, but seeing as how he's not pretty likely, but the no free agent's a lock, or no free that you can't. It's irresponsible to say this about any free agency, but seeing as how he is pretty likely, I can't think of a better phrase, to be a Bear. He fits well in line here. They're going to have to get that penalty issue in order, but he's one of the more underrated centers in the league. And this is an issue that hasn't been discussed enough. The Bears' offensive line's kind of in flux. They really only have, if you're moving over Cody Whitehair to guard, he projects well there, but he obviously would have to start over. They only really have one starter they can count on right now. And taking on Fulton would take care of 2 positions. But in a projection, that one starter is Charles Leno. So if you sign Fulton, which is the benefit of getting him to move Whitehair over, you can count on Leno. You can count on Whitehair in that projection. You can count on Fulton that he's not. I mean, who's the best center in the league in your opinion, Eric? Who's the best center in the league? If
The
you can,
absolute, unquestionably best center in the league when he is healthy in the entire NFL, like outside free agency, players under contract, blah, blah, blah. I would personally choose Marquise Pouncey.
okay, so Fulton isn't Marquise Pouncey, but he's good. He gets
Yeah,
the job done,
he's a tier underneath that.
and signing him fills two needs
Yeah,
essentially.
I would
It,
definitely
fill, it,
help
fill,
from
it
that
fills two
perspective.
needs. If the Bears are confident in Whitehair as a guard, if they want to play him at guard, if Harry Heaston, the offensive line guru, wants to play Whitehair at guard, it fills two needs. So I'd really like to see the move made. We'll see what happens with Bobby Massey. He's again, Jawan James might be a fit there. Keep in mind that Heaston connection. Um, and at least for one more year, the Bears will roll with Kyle Long. But in
Yep.
this free agency period, offensive line interior, it's the Fulton and Ryan Jensen show.
Right.
It's the Fulton and Ryan Jensen show. So aside from these positions, there's one more, and this is another guy that's a lock, and I want to have this as a disclaimer because I think people see Trey Burton tight end, and I've had this also pop up recently. Guys, Trey Burton's seems pretty likely to join the Bears, and he's not coming to take Adam Shaheen's job.
Nope.
That's not what the Bears are signing him for. That's not what he is. He's 6'3", 225 pounds, first of all. So he's not going to line up in line. He's a joker tight end, which is kind of barely a tight end in itself because he lines up all over the field. He's only a tight end in name. So he lines up in the backfield. He lines up in the slot. He lines up in the outside. Sometimes he does line up in line. He's capable. He's strong. He's a good blocker. But he's not coming to take Adam Shaheen's job. He's coming to be a Swiss Army knife behind Shaheen. This is a guy that's people see 31 catches. Oh, so if he gets 7 million, like what? That's 223,000, 224,000 reception. His value is not in the catches. It's what he's going to do for the rest of the offense. He can be the lead blocker, as I just mentioned. He can be the guy. He's a very natural pass receiver that gives you a solid option next to Shaheen. But he's not coming for Shaheen's job, and I just need that to be understood. I just need that to be understood because he's seems pretty likely to be a Bear. I'm putting air quotes around that. I'm putting in addition to what Burton is, let's not go with the lazy takes of, oh, he's Deion Sims 2.0, another guy getting overpaid. Completely different players, completely new free agency period. First of all, Burton is actually much more athletic and a much better receiver, and had a completely different responsibility coming out from the Eagles as opposed to Sims and his injury-prone issues in the Dolphins. So let's not be so reductive. Eric, your thoughts on Burton and the Bears?
So you are absolutely just hitting the nail right on the head in terms of Trey Burton to the Chicago Bears discussion. I mean, if there is any sort of validation you want as a fan, Mitchell Trubisky, the quarterback of the Chicago Bears, has been following Trey Burton on Instagram and Twitter.
Oh yeah, I forgot the social media contract negotiations.
No, because I mean, it seems silly, but in reality, it actually does mean a little bit. And it kind of gives you a little bit of an insight as to what the players in the league are hearing with their agents and their recruiting efforts. So, I mean, yeah, it's kind of funny. You see, basically, I'm just minding my own business on Instagram, and all of a sudden, Mitch Trubisky follows Trey Burton. I'm like, huh, I wonder what that means. But in all seriousness, so Trey Burton, he's a quintessential Joker tight end that Andy Reid and his disciples have utilized in all their offenses from Philadelphia to Kansas City. Again, Adam Shaheen, he is a tight end of the future. In fact, please, Bears fans, do not start the whole Jimmy Graham to the Bears discussion. It's not happening. It is
Oh, I wasn't
absolutely
even going to mention him. Yeah, let's get that. Jimmy Graham. The Bears aren't going to pay Jimmy Graham, guys. They're not going to give him the money he seeks. He'd be number one, and the Bears aren't looking to. They're not looking for a number one.
Yep,
Continue,
that is
Aaron.
all Shaheen. Shaheen is a tight end of the future. Matt Nagy's already discussed Shaheen in depth in different press conferences and meetings with the media. And really, adding Trey Burton into the fold would only help Adam Shaheen tremendously because he's going to be that tight end who complements Shaheen, takes a lot of pressure off of him to be basically the solo performer of the group. Also, it allows for offenses like the Chicago Bears' future offense to be a lot more creative and be able to create different mismatches and matchup issues with different defensive backs, dime packages, nickel packages. The number one way to counter a nickel or dime package in the league, it's not spreading out 4 or 5 wide receivers. No, that's why the dime and nickel packages were designed to begin with. No, it's actually getting a player like Burton, that hybrid receiver, tight end kind of guy. Move him around. Force those smaller defenders in the box, and then either have them mismatched in terms of physicality for routes, or just do a good old-fashioned running play. Hand Jordan Howard or Tariq Cohen the ball, or whatever running back they could possibly ever want, moving into the distant future, and just utilize those matchups and those formations to your advantage. So Trey Burton, I think he's a lock for the Bears. I mean, he's about, in my personal opinion, as good of a lock as you're going to get before everything's official. Which, again, nothing's official until the ink is to the paper, just as a disclaimer.
You're saying a lot based off of what I. Yes, guys. Just so everyone understands, it's pretty likely. In Eric's words, it's a lock that Albert Wilson and Trey Burton will be Bears. We're pretty confident that he's going off of what I told him. Yeah, so now you guys now it's easy to understand what it'll bring to the Bears. Let's wrap this up. So ultimately, I think we just kind of discussed half our predictions for the Bears. But do they get Allen Robinson or Sammy Watkins?
I'm going to say they get Allen Robinson. It's just all the factors are in play here. They've got players on the roster who know him. They've got coaches on the staff who know him. They have a very motivated GM who's out to prove a point and get Trubisky, that number one difference maker that you may or may not be able to find in the draft to begin with. And a player like Allen Robinson, that, again, it's a once in a 10-year type of free agent. Get him. Just shut up and take my money already, please. And I think, so again, yes, I think they get Allen Robinson. I think they get Albert Wilson. I think they get Trey Burton.
Yes.
Those, to me, are the three most likely free agent targets signings the Bears make.
Okay. Anybody else you want to add in as a prediction? I will agree with all three of those. I think the Bears will get Robinson. They're going to get Wilson and Burton. Wilson and Burton are, for lack of a better word, locks. I do think they'll get Fulton. I do think they'll lock in Fuller.
Yes, I think that's a big one too.
That's a big one too. I think it'll be around, let's say, $12.5 million. Do you agree?
Yeah. I think 12.5, 12.75, somewhere around that vicinity. At most 13 if they feel a little gracious.
And the guaranteed money is what people will watch, and I think it'll be around 50% guaranteed. And I think they'll get Bashaud Breeland next to Fuller. They understand that they'd like to. The best time to spend your cap space is when you're on when your franchise quarterbacks or ideal franchise quarterback is on his rookie contract. If you look at their salary cap situation, it's not as if they have many guys to worry about paying in the near future, aside from, say, Leonard Floyd and Cody Whitehair. So they can do it. They can get these guys. They can go all in. The first three are obviously the ones that I feel much more confident in: Robinson, Wilson, Burton, and then also Fuller, who's a homegrown guy. Um, but they can do it, and I think they will. I think they see that notion. The NFC is too competitive, and it's to not do so, and it's wasting time by not going all in as soon as possible.
Yes.
They have the opportunity to do it. It's wasting time. It's wasting once it's time to pay Trubisky $40 million a year, because that's what it might be by 2021, 2020.
That's going to be absurd.
It'll be absurd. And once that happens, that it's going to be much more difficult to build a championship contending team. You're going to have to hope Trubisky's a star level quarterback, but even if he is, it's going to be very difficult. It's going to be much more difficult to build around. This is the ideal time, and I think they're going to do it. I think they're going to. They realize that.
And I'm going to go with one big bold prediction from me for a couple of players that, if you want to add some more,
to the Bears, that is.
Yeah, to the Bears, that is. Really quickly, I think they are going to make a legitimate run at Tremaine Johnson because they have enough resources remaining to make a run at him. Will they sign him? I say it's about 50-50. And then you're going to go to the edge players. I think Junior Gillette will be considered substantially, kind of a veteran presence and, a who knows, what if type scenario. And then going to the defensive line, I think they may even be in play for a player like Sheldon Richardson. Who knows? Maybe Muhammad Wilkerson's already visited 5 different teams. They might even give him a call. So I wouldn't rule out any options on the defensive line, edge, and the cornerback market.
Let's finish this up with the big free agents, not limited to the Bears, that are available. So where does Kirk Cousins end up, Eric? I'm still going to say Vikings.
I hate saying it, but it looks like the Vikings, especially if this rumored 3-year, $91 million fully guaranteed deal actually falls through.
Yeah, it's not. It'll make the NFC North and NFC much more competitive, but at least there's a bit of solace knowing that the Vikings might eventually have to break up their defense because of it. So, and Kirk Cousins is. I like Kirk Cousins, but I don't think he's the guy that. I don't think he's like a superstar by any means. I think he's easier to beat. I think he's easier to beat than Aaron Rodgers.
He's not a Hall of Fame type player by any means. He's not the best quarterback the Vikings have ever gotten per se.
He'll make them better, but I'm talking more after a year or two.
Yeah, they'll make him better this year, but after this year, nothing's for sure. And by the ways, if they make that offer to him and they fail, a whole lot of pink slips are being handed out. Let me just tell you that.
Yeah, it'll capitulate absolutely everything. Andrew Norwell, the easy connection everyone's making. So the All-Pro, first-team All-Pro, 2017 All-Pro guard from the Panthers. I don't think he leaves East Rutherford, which would be the Giants. I think he's going to be a Giant.
I think he's going to be a Giant, but also you have to look at Cleveland. You have to look at the Colts, and actually don't rule out the Seahawks because they've just opened up a little bit of money to help try to fix that offensive line, and they're going to blow up that roster regardless.
Well, if they're blowing up the roster, then I don't think they would pay a $13 million guard, which is what Norwell might be. I think what's happened with the Giants of late in particular is that they still believe in Eli Manning at 37.
Yeah,
so they're gonna however, it's regardless of how you feel about that. I think we both agree that's a bad move. Getting Norwell would be a way to try to maximize that, and they have the cap space for it. And there's a bunch of different connections there. I don't think he's going to leave the facility once he visits. I think it'll probably be his first visit, and he'll be. Yeah. Tremaine Johnson. So I know you think the Bears are going to make it right at him, which would be great. Which would be better than Breeland if they did, if they locked that in with Fuller. But Johnson's a Bay Area guy.
Yeah.
And after the Niners locked in Richard Sherman, I don't think they're going to pay. I don't think they're going to go for another big name guy. They always could. And I'll say that Johnson goes to Oakland, who's going to look for some more secondary help. I'll say he becomes a Raider.
Yeah, I feel that'll be the top competition for Chicago because, of course, you've got John Gruden to worry about. He's a fantastic recruiter, although that's a whole different topic.
He's like a player's coach, but
Definitely a
what's
player.
going to appeal more to Johnson is the fact that the Raiders, they're not awful, and they play for at least one or year. They moved to Vegas after this year, so at least one more year, he's going to be in the Bay Area, or he's going to be close to and then after that, when they're in Vegas, it's going to be close to the Bay Area. So that has an appeal to him. He wants to stay as close to the West Coast as possible, I think.
Yep. So my top 3 teams for him would be. So you have Oakland, as you mentioned. I think Chicago makes a great run from, especially when the last team. I really can't believe I'm saying this, but I'm scared to death after I saw one of my Green Bay friends tag me in this. Green Bay might try to make a last-minute run at him, and if Chicago can sign him just to keep him out of Green Bay, I would really appreciate that.
Mm, it drive the price up on anything, but yeah. Other top free agents. So I mentioned Muhammad Wilkerson. I know he's already met with. Like 5 different teams, or roughly, but he's going to be a Packer. He has the Mike Patton connection. That's just something. That's just something you're going to have to accept, Eric. I know that upsets you. If you, a coach that can motivate him, that knows how to motivate him, that he likes. So I feel pretty strongly in that. Otherwise, I mean, maybe the Saints, because the Saints are going to be right there. Yeah. Muhammad Wilkerson, the Packers. What do you think?
Like I said, that would be the logical fit. Would be for him to go back to Mike McKee in defense in Green Bay. So that'll probably be a really realistic signing. The Saints would make some sense because they have a lot of young players all across that secondary and that front 7. They need that veteran presence to put up in the defensive line. So, yeah, Wilkerson would make sense there. But don't rule out the Colts. They could be looking for some defensive line help. We can also look at, say, well, I've already mentioned Chicago would be my dream fit. But San Francisco could actually be in play for a player like Wilkerson because where you have your young defensive end, first-round picks, kind of flashing a little bit. Eric Armstead, the other one, he's not exactly panning out yet. He's not really doing as well as they hoped. If you're to bring in a veteran like Muhammad Wilkerson up front, I think San Francisco would make that move.
At any rate, I mean, this week's going to be wild. I urge everyone not to have cabin fever. I urge everyone to stay calm, to keep a level head, to go into this with a positive mindset, or at least a neutral mindset. Not woe is me. I understand the Bears haven't had the best track record of late, as I mentioned at the start. But let's just stay calm. Free agency's going to be crazy, and it's going to be very crazy. The whirlwind of deals made each day. There'll be rumors that aren't wholeheartedly true that will come out each day. Just stay calm, and in Eric's words, until an agreement is official, and in my words, until the ink is dry on the contract.
Yep.
This is going to be exciting, guys.
Be optimistic.
Be optimistic. And optimistic. Yeah, we have Optimist Prime here. Be optimistic. This has been your free agency primer. Great discussion here with Optimist Prime of WCG. Newest. I think you are the newest writer.
Yes.
Eric Derwachter. Follow him on Twitter at @eDerwachter. He's pretty easy to find on Bears Twitter, considering his optimistic takes. Follow me on Twitter at Robert Zaglinski. Follow us on Twitter, our account at WCity Gridiron, and keep it with us over these next few days. to give you the proper perspective and a level-headed analysis of what's going to happen with the Bears this free agency. As I said, you only have my permission to panic if they strike out. I don't think they're going to strike out. Eric, of course, definitely doesn't think they're going to strike out.
And you do not have my permission to panic. You will not panic under any circumstances. I will bring down the hammer on that.
Yeah, don't panic, everybody. At any rate, enjoy the week. It's going to be fun. Stay classy.
Stay classy, Windy City Gridiron.